Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into what might literally be the most chaotic sporting event in human history. The 1904 Olympic Marathon was famously called a grueling, unhinged survival game, and let me tell you, that is not an exaggeration in the slightest. We usually think of the Olympics as this incredible display of peak athletic prowess, right? A showcase of perfectly fine-tuned human machines. But if someone pitched the actual events of this race in a writer's room for a slapstick comedy, they'd be told it was way too ridiculous. So forget everything you know about modern sports, because this was an absolute disaster masquerading as a foot race. So let me ask you, what happens when you combine a 24-mile dirt track, bake it in 90-degree heat, and throw in exactly one water station? This isn't some hypothetical riddle. This was the brutal on-the-ground reality in St. Louis, Missouri on August 30th, 1904. It sets up an incredibly dangerous scenario, one that was practically guaranteed to push human beings way past their breaking point before the starting gun even fired. It kind of hooks you right in, doesn't it? Let's find out exactly what kind of madness erupted from these lethal conditions. Okay, let's dive right into this. Section 1. An unsurvivable experiment. The dangerous setup of the 1904 marathon. I want you to really visualize the scene here. These athletes are staring down almost 25 miles of completely unpaved, dusty dirt roads spanning 7 brutal, lung-crushing hills. It wasn't a pristine track by any means. It was essentially a frontier trail just waiting to tear these runners apart. And hovering over that unforgiving trail was a suffocating 90 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 32 degrees Celsius for those of you outside the US, packed with that famously heavy Midwestern humidity. This represented an immediate, inescapable physical threat to every single runner lacing up their shoes that day. I mean, just breathing the air felt like a workout. So, it's scorchingly hot and incredibly humid. You'd expect plenty of hydration, right? Yeah, no. There was a grand total of exactly one water station on the entire 24-plus mile course, and it was located all the way at the 11-mile mark. Why? Well, it all comes down to the chief organizer of the games, a guy named James Sullivan. And for our story today, Sullivan is basically our primary antagonist, the villain orchestrating this whole nightmare. And here is Sullivan's brilliant idea. He was a massive proponent of something called purposeful dehydration. He wanted to use the Olympics to conduct an entirely unscientific, incredibly reckless experiment to test the limits of the human body by just intentionally withholding water from the marathon runners. He literally treated these elite athletes like lab rats in a deadly outdoor oven. Honestly, having him as the villain gives us a very clear target for our frustration as this completely predictable disaster unfolds. Which brings us to our next section, Section 2, the cast of characters, a wildly unqualified and chaotic roster. If Sullivan is our villain, we definitely need to meet the individuals taking on his gauntlet. I'm telling you, this lineup looks less like elite marathoners and way more like a bizarre video game roster ready to face off against an impossible challenge. Our main characters brought absolutely unhinged strategies to this race. First up, we have Thomas Hicks, an American brass worker aiming to survive purely on performance-enhancing rat poison and brandy. Then there's Fred Lors, an American bricklayer whose actual strategy was deciding running is overrated and just getting into a passenger car. My personal favorite, Felix Carvajal, a Cuban postman who showed up in street clothes, ran in heavy dress shoes, and basically treated the Olympic marathon like a leisurely sightseeing tour. And finally, Len Tanyane, a South African runner who ran a highly competitive race, all while having to actively dodge a pack of angry, wild dogs. You literally can't make this up. All right, let's get into the race itself. Section 3, the race to the bottom, a cascading series of disasters. So the starting gun goes off, but the runners aren't just battling the heat in the hills. They immediately have to share these dirt roads with doctors and judges who are driving right alongside them in primitive automobiles. And these cars are kicking up massive, choking dust clouds right into the faces of the athletes. We're going to trace how this all falls apart and map out the escalating chaos. Think of it like watching an elaborate, incredibly poorly planned heist crumbling in real time as we jump around the course to check in on simultaneous disasters unfolding from mile 9 all the way to mile 22. Starting off at mile 9, our bricklayer Fred Lors suffers severe stomach cramps. His solution? He just drops out, flags down an official's car, and goes for a joyride, comfortably waving at his struggling competitors from the passenger seat. Contrast that with William Garcia of California at mile 14. This is where those dust clouds became literally lethal. Garcia breathed in so much car dust that it coated his esophagus and actually ripped his stomach lining. He was found passed out on the side of the road with severe internal bleeding and barely survived the ordeal. While Garcia is being rushed to the hospital, let's jump ahead to mile 19 and check in on our Cuban postman, Felix Carbajal. Remember his street clothes? Well, he ended up hastily chopping his trousers off at the knees with scissors. By mile 19, he's getting a little hungry. He stops to chat with some spectators, steals a couple of peaches from an official's car, and then decides to snack on some rotten apples he finds in a nearby orchard. Unsurprisingly, rotten apples cause severe stomach cramps. So what does Carvajal do? He just goes to sleep. He literally takes a nap on the side of the marathon course. And while Carvajal is napping, we jump to the actual leader of the race, Thomas Hicks, at mile 22. Hicks is desperately begging for water, but thanks to our villain, James Sullivan, his trainers aggressively refuse to give him any. Instead, they hand him a highly dangerous cocktail of brandy, egg whites, and a milligram of strychnine, which is rat poison, just to stimulate his nervous system. Let that sink in for a second. They intentionally fed the race leader rat poison to keep his legs moving. And that sets the stage for our final act. Section 4, the unbelievable finish line, featuring cheating, hallucinations, and a miraculous revival. As we focus on the stadium finish, the sheer absurdity of this race truly reaches its peak. Remember Fred Loers cruising in the passenger car? Well, his ride broke down around mile 20. Feeling incredibly refreshed from his drive, he just hopped out, jogged the remaining distance into the stadium, and broke the finish line tape. On the flip side, we have the actual frontrunner, Thomas Hicks. Hicks is actively hallucinating, totally believing he still has 20 miles to go. He's lost 8 pounds of water weight over the course of the day. He physically cannot stand, so his 2 trainers literally pick him up by his arms and physically carry him over the finish line while his feet just drag in the dirt. So what happened to Loers? The audacity of this guy is just incredible. He almost accepted the gold medal from President Teddy Roosevelt's daughter, Alice Roosevelt, who was watching from the stands. Right before they could put the medal around his neck, someone finally called him out for riding in the car. His defense? He claimed it was just a joke. Just a harmless prank. And this brilliantly illustrates the completely bizarre climax of the entire event. Because Hicks's legs were technically making a walking motion as he was carried by his trainers, the judges officially declared him the first-place winner. It took 4 doctors to keep him alive after the race. Meanwhile, remember our napping postman, Carvajal? He woke up from his orchard nap, jogged into the stadium, and miraculously secured 4th place. And Lentanier, the guy who spent over a mile running in the absolute wrong direction to escape those wild dogs, yeah, he still finished in 9th place. So the crucial point we're left with is this. Where exactly is the line between testing human endurance and descending into utter, unhinged madness? The 1904 Olympic Marathon really forces us to reflect on the historical hubris of early sports science and the chaotic legacy of this event. I mean, this was an era where organizers legitimately thought withholding water and feeding athletes rat poison was groundbreaking science. Think about that the next time you watch a modern, meticulously planned sporting event. What crazy ideas are we testing out today that people a century from now will view as total madness? Keep that question in mind, and I'll catch you in our next explainer.